Coming up on today's show, the Milwaukee Bucks lost their first overtime game of the season to an undermanned Chicago Bulls team, 120 to 113. We're so used to the Bucks coming up big in the clutch, and that was not the case tonight. And we're going to dig into why that was. Also, take a look at the Bucks wing rotation after another injury, plus more on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, and I'm Camille Davis. In addition to this podcast, you can catch me on the Technical File podcast, as well as Cheesehead TV's Carry the G and MKE. Joining me, as always, is Frank Madden, the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the pod. And we appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. As mentioned, Frank, the Bucks have been really good in the clutch this season. We've talked about it so many different episodes for the last few weeks. The everydayers are aware of that. We know that the Bucks offense jumps from, already pretty good to an unbelievable rate in the fourth quarter. We know the team tightens up defensively in the fourth quarter. We've seen the numbers that Dame puts up in the fourth quarter. But tonight, against the Bulls team that had no DeMar DeRozan, no Zach LaVine, it wasn't the case. And I was hoping that they would take care of business and wouldn't need clutch minutes coming into this game. Didn't pan out that way for the Milwaukee Bucks.
No, I mean that's a terrible loss. I mean, we can do the whole usual thing where we say like, oh, it was great that they fought back and they were down 12, 94-82. And yes, to their credit, they did what they have been doing. They put themselves in a position to win this game. As you said, Dame scores 1 point in the second half, so it wasn't him doing his thing. I got my tweet off the other day when he had 65 points in 37 minutes in the clutch, and he was 79% true shooting, 6 assists, no turnovers. Like that was like the perfect snapshot of, Dame's crunch time dominance. So good thing I got that out there because, I don't know how many turnovers he had tonight in the clutch. The Bucks were just giving up pick sixes by the end of overtime. It was pretty ugly. They just sort of came apart at the seams. But they should have won this game, right?
Yeah.
And Giannis had a monster defensive effort. Camille, your defensive player of the year stock that you bought from me for Giannis is up. So good job, Camille, getting some of that, buying some low from me. 5 blocks. Seemed like he had that game-clinching block, just a terrific block on Patrick Williams late. Then he hits both free throws. And with 5 seconds left, you feel like, okay, probably got this. And so many parts of that last possession, that we can pick apart here. And, Adrian Griffin said, basically was like, all right, you want to blame me in the press conference.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. I always appreciate when coaches do that. It's always a little weird, right? I mean, he said that, he was asked about why they didn't foul because, when Vooch catches the ball, right, and eventually gives the handoff, I mean, he was not shooting the ball, right? Like it was a clear opportunity to foul him. Brook Lopez could have fouled him and, you would have been able to, again, like then you're playing the foul game and things like that, but so little time was left. Like you obviously feel good about your situation. And, Griff said basically like, well, the, rule that he told the team was, under 5 seconds, if backs to the basket, then that the rule is to foul. And there's but that's on me. And it's kind of like, well, it seems like you're kind of saying that you told the players to foul and then they didn't foul. So it was like a little bit like, and the whole way he framed it, it was kind of like, did he really like tell them to do that? Or is he just saying that generally that's the way you think about it? But I don't know. But look, teams usually don't foul down, in these situations. Like, I think in fairness to coaches and like Bud teams have done the same thing.
Even Giannis mentioned that too in his post game sound. He mentioned the fact that teams do it a lot of different ways. Sometimes they foul,
Yeah.
sometimes they don't. You've seen it work, you've seen it not work in various ways. So he's like, it just depends, and it can go either way.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like there was a litany of errors on. There were so many things, right? Like Chris Middleton and Malik Beasley didn't have clarity on whether they were switching on the weak side. Chris thought they were switching, which I assumed they would be switching, right? Normally you're switching in those situations, and the Bucks pretty much switch everything on the perimeter anyway. They were switching
Mhm.
even a lot of small big pick and rolls. We saw like Malik Beasley and Dame like battling Vucevic down in the post repeatedly in the fourth quarter. So I think that Beasley just didn't see Caruso coming around, so he was flat-footed, and then that means Brook pretty much has to switch and come out on Caruso. I don't think he had really a chance to foul Caruso at that point. That's not what I would have expected. Um, but it was a tough shot, and I mean the other question too is like, should Brook Lopez be on the floor there? Like you're only
Right.
defending the 3-point line, you're switching everything. What's Brook in there for? Like are you worried if you put a small guy out there that like they're gonna throw a lob to Nick Vucevic or something and get an easy two? Like kind of probably say like, okay, like, good luck. So I mean, just the fact that the Bucks like 5 in this like must stop defensive situation is Brook Lopez, who's a great defender, but really doesn't have a role when you're just striving to stop a 3-pointer. Giannis, okay, Giannis, yes, should have been on the floor. Chris, who is a very smart team defender and actually navigates screens pretty well, so I'm fine with Chris being out there. But like, let's be honest, Chris defensively, not exactly close to what he used to be.
Right.
And then it's Malik and Dame, right? And I get like, okay, you're not going to take Dame off in that situation because he's like a superstar and nobody does that.
Right.
But like, I don't know, it's just wild that Malik Beasley is just like literally has just sort of been willed into this like stopper role, even though he just is not a good defender. And so he was out there, and again, I'm not going to say like, oh, he blew it or something like that, but you look at the chain of events, like seemingly not either not knowing he was supposed to switch or not seeing Caruso coming up. That was sort of the first, domino in terms of the actual like action, and then Caruso just hit a hard shot.
Yeah.
I mean, like that was not an easy shot. It was not like the Landry Shamet wide open shot. That was even more horrendous execution late in games that we saw in that Wizards game a week ago or whenever it was, last Friday, Saturday, whenever it was, Friday, I guess. So yeah, Bucks late game execution. Some questions just like why are some of these dudes out on the floor? Like Campaign was on the floor in that situation, like just really underscoring like, man, the Bucks really need some dudes back because
Hmm.
if Pat Connaughton and Heck Crowder, are out there. Andre's a rookie, but I certainly think, Andre gives a better effort and would contest a shot better in a situation like that than Malik Beasley. Yeah, it's not great. So yeah, I mean, again, Bucks had they really had a perfect opportunity to quote unquote steal a game that should never have needed stealing.
Right.
And I think we can talk about kind of what went wrong with this game, but I mean, to me, someone needs to tell Griff like, don't use the phrase energy and effort, even when it's probably true. Don't use it because there's too much Jason Kidd baggage with that phrase. But he used it like multiple times in the post game presser. And I mean, unfortunately, the offensive rebounding, it actually ended up evening out a fair bit. Giannis had 6 offensive rebounds, but in like midway through the fourth quarter, it was like 14-3. It was like a 40% offensive rebound rate for the Bulls. So like 40% of their misses they rebounded. That doesn't even include like how many times they got fouled like on rebounds and they got to keep possession off a loose ball foul. Bucks had 3 offensive rebounds, which was like a 14% offensive rebound rate. And again, like defense, on defense, you like to hold the opponent to like under, low 20s, you'd say.
Mhm.
So you're up about like almost 2x that. And so it's just terrible. Like it's just, like the Bulls didn't shoot that well. I mean, they didn't shoot the lights out in this game or something like that. It's one thing if they just get lucky from 3, but Bucks, they forced 21 turnovers. They also committed 21 turnovers and they gave up a crap ton of offensive rebounds
Mhm.
and, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? I mean, they've just been doing this all season. And, like, I get it. Like, when you're winning the games, you can always play the glass half full approach. But when you catch an L like this, then, you got to be realistic that it was an aberration that they couldn't, magically pull it out in the end. But the kind of fingerprints of this loss, and just, again, you actually get up to a big lead early, and then, just completely sort of sleepwalk through the second, third, and beginning of the fourth quarter. It's like, all right, that's how you just, blow games in against teams that you obviously should beat.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Brooke Lopez being out there during that last possession where Caruso hit that crazy fadeaway three over him, and thinking about who they could have thrown out there. Like you mentioned, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the Bucks roster is pretty thin. But even if you wanted to put a big out there in that situation, and I wouldn't have think to say this, but like if you want to have size, you might as well put Bobby out there in that situation. Like you already have Bobby playing this aggressive trapping defense whenever he's out there on the floor. So like if you were going to play a big, I would have thought that it would have been Bobby instead of Brooke, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. It's disappointing because you look at that second Washington game, the Portland game, the Miami game, and now the Chicago game. And those are 4 games where on paper you're looking at them and you're like, this should be one of those wins that's, I'm going to say an easy win because it's the
Point
NBA.
differential, baby. Yeah.
Right? You would think that these would be games where the Bucks can come through and, not need this clutch time, like I said, coming into it, where I thought that, hey, this could be a game where maybe we can stretch out a lead, not have to even dabble in crunch time minutes, but yet and still, without DeMar, without Zach, it was still a close game. Kobe White and Vooch were just doing what they were doing in this game. Caruso snapped in the second half. The first half, he was quiet. In the second half, here he comes. And while it was a tale of two halves for Alex Caruso, it was also a tale of two halves, I think, for Damian Lillard. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into what that looked like because we've gotten used to Dame time already early on in this season. And in the Chicago game, it just looked a little different from what we saw from Dame in the second half. And I want to dig deeper into that after we talk a bit more about our friends from FanDuel. As the weather continues to continue to get colder, the NFL offers continue to stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. Such $150 if your team wins. If you were betting on tonight's Thursday night football game and you picked the Dallas Cowboys, I'm sure that comeback win had you excited about that one. But if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel at all, listen, there is no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So make sure that you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Again, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season right. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We'd also like to take this time just to say thank you to everybody who tunes into Locked On Bucks. Shout out to all the everydayers who come through and hang out with us, especially those in the YouTube comments as well. Love the conversations there on a day-to-day basis. Also want to inform you all about the Locked On Sports channel on YouTube. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports today is here for you with 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. So make sure you go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So like I mentioned with Dame, first half, it looked like everything was coming really easy for Dame. Was able to see him get off in the mid-range. He was efficient from the field. He was 7 to 10 from the field in the first half. Again, looked really good. Only 1 turnover coming in that time. He finished the game with 18 points, meaning that in the second half of this game, he was only able to score 1 additional points. He finished 7 of 16 from the field, meaning he went 0 from 6 from the field in the second half. And the big part of it to me was the turnovers. Damian Lillard had 6 turnovers in the second half, and we're just not quite used to seeing a second half performance from Dame like this. Looks like Frank froze a little bit. Everydayers know that's part of the show at this point. So while we wait for Frank to come back, I'm just going to dig a little bit more into that because watching the second half, I was continuously wondering, is this Dame just taking what the defense is giving him and he's using this as a time to facilitate, using this time to get other players involved because he's seeing so much extra attention after the first half that he had. Uh, you saw him again. He finished the game with 13 assists. And I think that needs to be said as well, because although he wasn't scoring, he definitely was facilitating and making sure his teammates got the ball. I mean, Malik Beasley had 15 3-point attempts in this game, and a lot of them came off of Dame Lillard, passes. So it was just really interesting to me to see how Dame was able to really pick his spots in the first half. He was scoring in the mid range. He was scoring from three. He was getting to the basket. And then in the second half, it felt like he kind of took that step back. And I did wonder at first if part of that was because, Giannis got into foul trouble in the first half. And with Giannis being in foul trouble, he finished the first half with 4 points. And the third quarter came, and it was like it was Giannis's quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, when Dame finally did get back in, because we know at this point that Dame is going to play the entire first quarter, the entire third quarter, end of the second quarter, end of the fourth quarter. That is just his minutes rotation. It's what he requested. It's what he wanted. It's what he's comfortable with. So with the third quarter being big Giannis minutes, big Giannis buckets, and the fourth quarter when Dame gets back in, it's more facilitating. It was just really interesting to me to see the difference in performance between the first and second half for Dame. So Frank, what about Dame's performance stood out to you in tonight's game?
I mean, yeah, it obviously it felt like Giannis and Dame kind of just split up the halves, and unfortunately, we didn't see any period where both of them were like really effective scoring. And Dame went 0 for 6 in the second half, scored 1 point, and yeah, I mean, some of the facilitation was there. I think Kevin O'Connor pointed out that Dame and Giannis didn't run any pick and rolls in the overtime period, but
Shame.
I think. I mean, I think there should be a lot of focus on obviously how much Giannis is screening for Dame, but I think the flip side is we saw Caruso defending Giannis in overtime. And so it's kind of like when Drew Holiday defends Giannis. Like, what does that mean for your pick and roll? Well, it means you just switch the pick and roll. So then Dame, it's not like Dame being able to attack Vucevic or something like that, right? I mean, that's why I think, to be honest, like in many ways, it's more appealing for Dame to run a pick and roll with Brook because then he's got Vucevic that he can attack either with a pull up or go to the rim versus Alex Caruso, who's the best defender, best perimeter defender on the Bulls, right? So I think that's one of the issues I think with Dame Giannis pick and rolls is a lot of times I think smaller guys are better to put on Giannis anyway. And then when they do that, I'm not saying it completely neutralizes the Dame Giannis pick and roll, but it, pretty much means that the advantage just becomes like Giannis mismatched against whoever was guarding Dame. And, Giannis is not like a mismatch killer in that regard. Like, it's not like you just run that and then post him up and then, he just can bully and get to the rim and score. We saw him have some success against Dosunmu when he got some switches and kind of caught him in transition like mismatches and things like that. But he again, like especially with smaller guys, I feel like it's almost like harder because like they just are going to flop and like they're kind of like little mice. You're just like you don't know how to kind of handle them. But yeah, so I think that's that approach from the Bulls I think helped. But in the first half, I mean, I thought the Bulls just did a great job. Like there were no transition opportunities for Giannis. When the Bulls missed shots, they just got their own offensive rebounds. So there wasn't really like these breakouts. And Giannis got his only basket of the first half on a transition dunk. But even with all the turnovers the Bulls had, they weren't really translating into opportunities for Giannis. So I just thought they did a really good job of congesting the paint. And Brook had it was like one of something in the first half too. And Bobby, I think I don't know if he even made a shot in the first half. So all the Bucks big guys didn't do shit in the first half. Like, it wasn't just Giannis, it was all the perimeter guys who were doing stuff. And, again, I think it was because Dame was getting opportunities to go downhill against Vooch and some of those things. And so, yeah, I mean, we can say like, well, did they just let Giannis do too much stuff in the second half or something like that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Giannis played well in the third quarter. Game was right there. nip and tuck going into the fourth quarter, and then kind of they let go of the rope. I think when Dame was out, right? Dame was out to start the fourth quarter, and that's when the Bulls kind of went on their run, and that's when Giannis was on the floor pretty quickly. He was not there initially, and then got back on the court pretty quickly. And Chris Middleton had a good start, and then Chris didn't do crap in the second half either. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Chris scored a point in the second half, and so again, like when neither Chris Middleton nor Dame scores a point in the second half of a game that is close, we're going to take an L, right? So yeah, I think in some ways, this is like, well, kind of a weird circumstance. You don't expect that to happen very often, but Bucks have been sort of begging for a bad loss the way that they've played these games, and they certainly got one tonight.
Absolutely didn't. There is no debating that. I'm not taking any like moral victories away from this one. Like, this is just a disappointing loss for the Milwaukee Bucks. And another aspect of this game that was disappointing was to hear that Andre Jackson Jr. had back tightness, and he was ruled out of the game for the rest of the third quarter. And at this point, I feel like we are just continuously having this conversation about the Bucks wing depth and what that looks like, because there was another injury that took place. And I want to dig deeper into that as well after I talk a little bit more about our friends from Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals and all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And one reason that I love Game Time is that you can buy tickets up to the last minute. So if you're sitting here and you're thinking like, hey, maybe I want to check out Sunday Night Football at Lambeau Field when the Chiefs come to town. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes' first time playing in Lambeau Field. Keep an eye on those tickets. You can continuously check Game Time up until the time of the game. So that's the biggest benefit of Game Time to me. Like, it's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. On top of that, you can see the view from your seat before you buy it, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can see the all-in prices, so you can see your total up front. You can know that you're getting a great deal without any hidden fees, and you can buy the tickets so quickly, like seconds. It only takes 2 taps. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Frank, like I mentioned, unfortunately, during today's game, we saw that Andre Jackson Jr. was ruled out in the third quarter with some back tightness. The broadcast mentioned the fact that the back injury is something that Andre's been dealing with throughout the season. So apparently something happened in this game, just kind of inflamed a little bit more for him. We already know that we're without Pat Connaughton, who injured his ankle earlier this week. We know that we've been without Jay Crowder since the beginning of this month, but I did see in the Journal Sentinel, an article came out today mentioning the fact that Jay Crowder has returned back to on-court practice. He's on pace for his 8-week recovery window that he was placed in. So this is not going to be like an Aaron Rodgers situation with that Achilles where you can expect him to be back far earlier than what was projected. But it is some good news to hear that at least Jay is on the right path. He's back on the court, getting some reps in, and he's on his way to recovery, because this Bucks team at this point is really thin at that position.
They are, but I mean, again, it's like, look at the team on the other side, right? Like, no Zach LaVine, no DeMar DeRozan, and again, like, I think as long as anytime you've got Dame, Giannis, and Chris, then I think figure it out, right? I think there's the positive spin of you're going to need Marjan, who had a couple moments tonight. You're going to need Andre when he's healthy. Hopefully he's not joining this list of guys that are going to be missing time. I think Pat probably is going to miss another game or two with that ankle injury, most likely. And I mean, it puts you again in these weird situations we talked about last game. The the Bucks going with the jumbo lineup at points, and that's the route they went in the overtime. Chris, was, I guess, hit his minutes limit, which, again, he was at 27, so that's the second highest number of minutes he's played all year. So again, I don't know exactly like what the math is that they're doing to figure out how much he's going to play in these games. He had the 29-minute game. I think that was against Boston, I guess, right? I think he played 29 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, going out early against the Wizards wasn't ideal. I think he played 23 minutes the other night in Miami, which, coming back from the Achilles would make sense that he may be a little reduced. So, yeah, I mean, I pray for the day when Chris Middleton is no longer having to sit out overtimes of games because of, minutes restrictions. Hopefully we're getting closer to that, because, Bobby, let's be honest, Bobby really didn't do much of anything tonight. He had put back at the first half buzzer, which was, I believe, the Bucks' only offensive rebound of the entire half. And other than that, not a lot to write home about. He did have a steal off when he got switched on to Caruso. He deflected and stole an inbound or an entry pass to the post, which was nice in overtime. But, let's just say that was not a lineup I think that Adrian Griffin is going to be going to by choice a whole lot. It seems like that is an option that, they went to perhaps in part to try to do something about the offensive rebounding issues. We talked about that last game. The upside of having those bigs out there is hopefully it should help you on the glass, but it was a bit too little too late. And, by the end of the game, obviously it kind of had turned into a bit of a joke with the Bucks just, losing the ball at midcourt and turning into, a breakaway dunk contest for the Bulls. So bad loss. I mean, I can remember a year ago, Camille, I don't even remember that game in late December in Chicago where I believe Drew was hurt. I think Drew and Chris were both hurt. And so it was pretty much, Giannis in a cloud of dust in late December of last year. And they lost, I think they lost 3 or 4 in a row, and including that horrible Boston game on Christmas. And then they had a loss to Chicago as well, where they went into overtime and Giannis had, I think, over 40, and then he just totally sucked in overtime. Kind of just basically threw away like a great night from him. So, again, like there's going to be ups and downs. I would say this too. I mean, there's been so much discourse about like how as fans, like we should process like what's happening. And, there's oftentimes people, I think it is fair to say, like, go back to, Justin was talking about on yesterday's pod, like go back to last year, the year before, the championship year. Like you're going to find stretches in all those seasons where the Bucks lost multiple games in a row and, looked bad and looked underwhelming. And it was just like, what is this team doing? Right. I remember going into the Tyler Run playoffs in 21. I was not sold at all on that team. Like it was a really like meh regular season, right? 72 game season. They win 46, third in the East. I mean, not exactly looking like a juggernaut all year. And so I think it's fair to point that out. But I think the flip side is, fundamentally, like we knew that the core of what the Bud teams was that we knew they'd be able to play defense when they were healthy. And we knew they had, enough firepower. I mean, for the most part, up until last season, those teams were very good offensively, at least in the regular season. So you expected those teams to win tons of games because they had a formula and it worked right from the jump, right? And I think the anxiety, to the extent people have anxiety, and I certainly have some anxiety, is the fact that it's a different group. Chris in particular is older. Brooke is older, but
He's still
looks
good,
like
though.
Brooke. Yeah. Dame is new, and your perimeter defense obviously is way worse, and you have a new coach, and you only get to pick one coach. It's not like drafting players and you can just not play the guy, right? Like coach is a coach. Like if you don't make the right hire, like that's you're gonna have to live with that guy or not live with that guy. And so I think it's understandable to be like, what is your default, right? Like as a fan, I think it's more enjoyable to just have a glass half full and say like, yeah, we're 13-6. A lot of these core guys we won a championship with, and the biggest name guy that we didn't, Dame Lillard, like he's an upgrade on the guy that, in Drew that he replaced. So I mean, I think, again, for people's sanity, I think it's easier to just sort of stick to that stuff. But I think if we're going to just be like clear-eyed about it and sort of sober and, analytical about it, like I think it's fair to say like this team, we should expect more in terms of the way they're playing, not the record, but right now they play like less than the sum of their parts. And so I think you have to put, you can't say the coaching staff is doing a great job when the team consistently, underwhelms for long portions of games. And, they basically just sort of get bailed out on kind of their pure talent essentially at the end of this games, right? Like they don't run a lot of Dame pick and roll. Zach Lowe was talking about this the other day, where like they run weirdly few Dame Giannis pick and rolls, considering that's the most obvious thing to do. And then, obviously Dame has been great in crunch time, and they've obviously had a really great record there. So, I think it's fair to want more from these guys, because
Absolutely.
the record is fine, but I really hope we get to see them match up in the in-season tournament with the Celtics, because I think we're all fascinated to see how the Bucks stack up. And I was not expecting to be impressed the last time they played, and I was not. But it's early in the season still, and they may get, if they can beat the Knicks, which I don't want to take too much for granted there, but it is a home game at least. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think, with this team, we have not seen them consistently play at a very high level, and I think there's enough new parts and kind of new components to this story that, I think I don't know. I don't take as much on faith, let's say that, as I did in previous years. So we'll see. Tonight's game sucked.
Yeah.
Luckily, there will be another one soon, and hopefully they look much better in a couple days.
Yeah, and before they
I
even
assume we
get
have a
to the
couple days,
Knicks,
Camille.
yeah, they have the Hawks on Saturday,
Hawks.
and we saw what happened the last time the Bucks played the Hawks. So
Yeah.
there is some chance for redemption this weekend before we get back into.
Hopefully, it's like the Raptors, right? Like where you got killed by the Raptors and then you turned
And
it
then we got
around.
our
Like,
get back.
can we do that? Can we not have like the the usual like Onyeka Okongwu does such a good job against Giannis discussion?
Right.
I don't want to have that discussion, Camille. I don't want to be
I hope
talking to
not.
you on Sunday about Onyeka Okongwu being such a great goddamn matchup against Giannis. Like, I want to talk about Giannis detonating on Onyeka Okongwu on Saturday night, but we'll see. Wait a couple days.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. And hopefully as well with that, we hear that the injury, to Andre isn't that serious. Hopefully we hear more about when we can expect Pat back, because although we didn't have Pat in this game and Andre got injured, definitely still a game the Bucks should have won. And for me, those injuries just bring up more questions about what's to come, because like you mentioned, there's been a lot of discourse around this team. And it's one of those situations where I think more than one thing can be true at the same time. Like there are definitely things that are concerning about this Bucks team, but there are also reasons to kind of say like, well, hold on, they're giving us some reasons for optimism as well, with clutch time performances, with the fact that it's still early, they're still learning, and you can see in a general sense some progress being made with this team since the beginning of the season. So hopefully there's some hope there, and hopefully the next time that we talk, we're discussing a Bucks win. As a reminder, before we get out of here, make sure you checked out Locked On Sports today, covering the top news stories in the sports world 24/7 with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national show. So make sure you head over to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever Sports 24/7 streaming channel. For Frank and myself, we're going to get out of here. We'll catch you guys all on Monday.